Tonight the world once again stands on the edge of fear and uncertainty as events in two regions unfold with alarming intensity. Russia has unleashed one of its largest drone assaults on Ukraine, firing more than 115 drones into the night sky and targeting several major cities. At the same time, the Middle East is sliding toward a new and dangerous escalation, with clashes between Israel and Iran-backed groups intensifying and the possibility of a wider war drawing closer. These two crises may be taking place thousands of kilometers apart, but they are interconnected in ways that reveal the fragile state of global peace. In Ukraine, the attack began after midnight as waves of Shahed drones, supplied by Iran and launched from Russian-controlled territories, swarmed toward civilian and military targets. Explosions thundered through Kyiv, Kharkiv, Odesa, and other cities, setting residential blocks ablaze and knocking out power facilities. Ukrainian air defenses fought desperately through the night, firing interceptor missiles and anti-aircraft guns to bring down the drones. Officials later announced that about 87 of the incoming drones had been destroyed, but more than 24 reached their targets, causing destruction and spreading terror. The pattern of Russia's strategy is clear. Rather than focusing solely on the front lines, Moscow is determined to break Ukraine's will by destroying its infrastructure and making daily life unbearable as winter approaches. The images from the ground were harrowing. Families rushed into underground shelters, children cried in fear, and firefighters battled towering flames. Entire neighborhoods were plunged into darkness as power grids went offline. President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the nation, calling it one of the darkest nights in recent memory and promising resilience despite the devastation. On the Russian side, the Defense Ministry declared that the operation had targeted military installations and claimed success in weakening Ukrainian capabilities. Yet observers and independent analysts argue that the attacks were aimed just as much at civilians, using fear as a weapon of war. International responses were swift. The United States condemned the strikes and announced another package of air defense systems, including Patriot interceptors. Germany pledged more IRIS-T systems and ammunition, while other NATO members voiced solidarity with Kyiv. But behind public declarations of support, there is unease. The enormous cost of sustaining Ukraine's defenses, combined with political debates in Washington and European capitals, raises doubts about how long aid can continue at its current pace. Interceptors and missiles are expensive and take time to manufacture, while Russia can continue launching swarms of relatively cheap drones supplied by Iran. Analysts warn that if Moscow keeps up this pressure, Ukraine may find it increasingly difficult to protect its skies. This war has become not just a battle between two countries but a test of wills between Russia and the West. Moscow is betting that the longer the conflict drags on, the more fatigue will set in among Western populations and governments. Kyiv, meanwhile, relies heavily on consistent international support to hold the line and to keep its citizens safe from nightly bombardments. The uncertainty about the future is a heavy burden carried by millions of Ukrainians who simply want to survive another winter without losing their homes or families. While Ukraine burns under the relentless assault, the Middle East is once again sliding toward crisis. In recent weeks, Israeli airstrikes on southern Lebanon have intensified, with the government in Tel Aviv claiming to target Hezbollah's weapons storage sites and command posts. Hezbollah, heavily backed by Iran, has responded with barrages of rockets into northern Israel, forcing thousands of Israeli citizens into shelters and evacuations. The danger of this tit-for-tat turning into an all-out war is growing, reminiscent of the devastating 2006 conflict that left Lebanon in ruins and Israel shaken. At the same time, Gaza remains volatile, with Palestinian factions issuing warnings of new escalations if the blockade is not eased. Sporadic clashes with Israeli forces continue, and the humanitarian situation deteriorates each day. Iran has promised to retaliate for the killing of its senior advisors in recent Israeli strikes in Syria, raising the stakes further. The United States has already deployed additional warships and fighter aircraft to the region, signaling its readiness to defend Israel and its interests. The presence of American forces also increases the risk of miscalculation, where one incident could drag Washington directly into another Middle Eastern war. The conflicts may appear separate, but they are linked by a network of alliances and strategies. Russia and Iran have built a strong partnership in recent years, trading weapons, technology, and political support. Iranian drones fill Russian arsenals while Moscow provides diplomatic cover for Tehran in international forums. For both, fueling instability in different regions works to their advantage by dividing the attention and resources of the West. Every Patriot missile sent to Ukraine and every warship deployed to the Persian Gulf stretches Western capabilities further. Some analysts describe this as a multi-front strategy designed to wear down American and European resolve. For ordinary people, the consequences are devastating. In Ukraine, civilians spend nights in freezing basements, listening to sirens and waiting for the sounds of explosions to fade. Children try to sleep in darkness while their parents wonder how to keep them safe as power stations are destroyed and heating systems collapse. In Lebanon, families are once again on the move, abandoning their homes near the border as rockets fly overhead. In Gaza, shortages of medicine, food, and fuel worsen by the day, leaving civilians trapped in an endless cycle of conflict and poverty. These wars are fought by states but suffered most intensely by those who have no say in the decisions of leaders. Looking ahead, the prospects are grim. In Ukraine, neither side shows any sign of backing down. The front lines remain fluid but without a decisive breakthrough. Russia seems committed to a long war, while Ukraine clings to Western aid as its lifeline. Unless diplomacy finds a way forward, this war could stretch well into 2025, leaving behind only destruction and loss. In the Middle East, the situation is even more unpredictable. A single rocket that causes mass casualties or an Israeli strike that eliminates top Hezbollah commanders could ignite a regional war that drags in Iran, Syria, and possibly Gulf states. The United States and Europe would be forced to respond, and the entire region could be set aflame. The world today appears trapped in a cycle of overlapping crises. The war in Ukraine challenges European security and the balance of power with Russia. The Middle East threatens to explode, drawing in global powers and destabilizing energy supplies. These are not isolated events but parts of a larger picture of instability, where rival blocs compete for influence and use conflict as a tool of strategy. For many observers, it feels like the beginning of a new era, one in which global peace is no longer the default assumption but a fragile hope constantly under threat. Tonight, as Kyiv clears the rubble from drone strikes and Lebanese villages count the cost of cross-border shelling, the sense of uncertainty deepens. Leaders speak of strength, resistance, and defense, but for the families who lose their loved ones, these words bring little comfort. History is unfolding in real time, and it is not a history of peace but of renewed confrontation. What happens next in Ukraine and the Middle East will not only determine the fate of those regions but will shape the future of global order. Whether the coming months bring diplomacy or disaster will depend on choices made by leaders who hold immense power yet often appear driven more by ambition than by humanity. The sky over Kyiv filled with drones and missiles, the streets of Gaza trembling with explosions, and the fields of Lebanon burning under artillery fire all testify to the same truth. The world is still far from learning how to prevent the tragedies of war. Until that lesson is learned, civilians will continue to hide in basements, parents will continue to bury their children, and nations will continue to gamble with peace as if it were expendable. The hope remains that somehow the cycle can be broken, but the reality on this night is stark. Russia's relentless offensive in Ukraine and the growing storm in the Middle East show that the shadow of war is not behind us, it is the reality of the present.